Hey YouTube. So this is a bridge I made which was originally going to be the first episode of a new YouTube series I'm planning. However, I've decided to go in a different direction with that, namely no direction as yet. But I thought I would still show how this was made and just what its deal is. I try to maximize the infrastructure in my city, so the goal here was to produce a bridge that would account for many different networks and hopefully harbor interesting interchanges on either side. The connections in this video are pretty basic as I didn't want to spend too much time on something I won't be using, but anyway, here it is. The bridge has two decks. On the bottom deck there's a quad track metro track, a 2-lane highway, 2 lanes each direction, and 2 sets of railway tracks, so 4 tracks altogether. On the top deck there's another 2-lane highway, and the single outside lanes are a designated busway made with the Shuto Expressway ramps. The separation of the bus lanes might seem superfluous, and that's very much my steez, but do note that this bridge is intended for a city with a bus highway running through it. The idea being that buses traverse the city more or less like trams, running on designated routes as well as being distributed throughout the road network. Hopefully I'll explore this idea more in my series. Finally, the concrete pillars supporting the top deck are Ronix's expressway pillars, although to make them thicker, one pillar segment is comprised of 4 pillars, I'll get into that later, and the suspension pillars are called Ayoni Bridge.
Building the bridge.
I used 2 suspension pillars here, but you could place more following the same procedure and it might work. To make the bridge decks follow the same curve, I line up the end rungs so they're parallel. Then I place an adjacent road parallel to one of the outer rungs from which I will later run the bottom deck of networks perpendicular to. Actually, if I lay the deck networks while the guide is perfectly parallel, they follow too shallow a curve, so I need to adjust the angle slightly. This is done precisely by counting how many instances the angle is altered by the minimum allowed degree. 6 times worked for me. Then I can replicate this for another guide that will go up the other end. Before I lay the bottom deck, I make a test road to adjust the guide to a convenient height. I start with the highway because it's easy to begin from the middle and work out, and the inner edge, by the way I'm left-hand drive so the inner edge is left, should more or less meet the suspension anchors while intersecting the far guide at 90 degrees. Then I can mirror this for the other side of the highway and basically repeat for metro and rail with fences overlapping. Note, upgrading the guide road to ground elevation mode enables the rail networks to intersect it. The suspension pillar is obtruding, so I raise the rail slightly and the bottom deck is finished. To construct the concrete pillars, I combine 4 of the longest horizontal segments and array them in a line of 5. I combine the vertical pillars in the same way and attach to the ends of the horizontal segment. So long as it's raised slightly, one of the tallest vertical segments provides enough height to clear the highway light poles, and I can copy the horizontal segment to the top. When positioning the pillar against the bottom deck, I line up the bottom segment with the metro fence and overlap the vertical segments with the outer fences. Replicating this for the rest of the bridge is arduous, but it's mostly just copy and paste. I skip 1 gap in the suspension cables for the first replication, then eye the rest because the gaps vary in size. The placements aren't perfect, but when viewing the final product, I think this process is pretty forgiving. Top keck. Like the bottom deck, I'm going to position guide roads at the end and run the networks from there. This time I can skip adjusting the angles by spawning the guides from the networks I already laid, but I'll still build a test road to adjust the height so that the horizontal pillar segment meets the highway fence. Then I lay the networks, making sure the highways are sufficiently off-center to avoid being clipped by the suspension cables. That's it. I'll just show you guys one more thing, which is placing the bridge.
Placing the bridge.
So you can see that's all over the place and you're going to have a bad time. So in Terrain Editor, just fill in the area where the bridge is going to go. Then I can go back and grab the bridge. And in Terrain Editor again, just Control Z, bam! Now I can lower the bridge. And I can finally get rid of the pillars underneath, sparing the suspension pillars. And we are done. Alright, thanks for watching and goodbye forever. can lower the bridge now. Whoops. Yeah, no. And I can finally get rid of these pillars under there. Oh, kill me. Okay. But, yeah, spare the bridge pillars.